it's one of these things that we talk about a lot on our show is, we see as fans, we see these athletes, on Sunday or Monday and in performance, but we often fail to understand that behind the scenes, they have, their own communities, their own neighborhoods, their own families they have to go back home to, and they have to address these issues, like with their children, and their neighbors and stuff like that. And so it's something that's really important, I think, for the workplace to be sensitive to. So it's great that you guys were having those conversations. Definitely.
Yeah, and that's so true what you're saying in terms of, remembering and placing importance on the fact that they have a life outside of sports, and, whether they have a family with kids or they're, on their own, all sorts of things come up in that other realm that, impacts their focus or their play. And so it's important that we do kind of embrace that whole person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So really appreciate you coming on. What is your specific role? Because when I looked you up, I saw that you have quite a lot of different roles and a lot of different titles. So how would you like to be introduced?
Well, I guess my primary role is the team psychologist for the Rams. And, within that role, I do a lot of different things. But I also maintain a private practice and work with individuals, both sport related and not non-sport related, but athletes of all ages and levels. And yeah, and then, I give presentations every once in a while and present at conferences. And then, so, it's not the same every day, which I love about it.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
And you are also you ran track and field at Notre Dame?
Yeah, I was a sprinter and a hurdler at Notre Dame. And so, a lot of what I bring to my career is both professionally based, but also based on personal experience and things I've learned along the way. So, I think it helps me be relatable and kind of understand the perspective based on some of the experiences I've had. But, nobody's story is exactly the same. And certainly this level is not the same as where I competed. But I think having been through some stuff myself in an athletic realm helps me connect with other athletes.
Absolutely. So you kind of know the hard work and what it
sure.
takes to get to a certain level through sports. So I'm sure that connection helps a lot with players you're working with today.
Definitely. And just, knowing the hard work and the sacrifice that it takes, but also the relationships that can develop and the loyalty. There's so many life lessons learned in sport that then, transfer over into life after sport. So I like to kind of make those connections with athletes wherever they are in their sport journey. And, it's always interesting to hear how they're able to apply that.
That's awesome. So I'm glad we have you on the show today. You're not only a former athlete, but you work with athletes and you're a mental health professional. Yeah. So we're very fortunate to have you on today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
One of the things to highlight on this show is, all the great things that mental health can do for teams, for athletes, for, the sports community in general. So it's great to have an ambassador, at the professional level to kind of share some of your experiences with us. How much do you think the stigma, that society often kind of places on those that have mental health challenges, like how much do you think that influences the athletes in your organization to want to come to you when they have something going on that they want to address?
There is still a stigma, in the mental health world for sure. And that stigma, I think, is higher and harder to overcome for athletes because, they're especially high level athletes because they're so often perfectionists. And, to acknowledge maybe some inner struggles might feel imperfect or flawed. And that's hard for them to digest as part of their whole identity. But I will say our club is very lucky in that mental health services are advocated from the top down. And so it's really become less taboo to talk about, and the stigma really is fairly minimal on our team, even in comparison to some other teams. And everybody knows that it's there as a resource. And we kind of have three different levels of people who come to see me. Some elect to come on their own, and they don't even have to tell anyone, that if they just want support, it's all confidential. Then some are kind of nudged
Yeah.
if it seems like they could use some extra support, and then there's some mandated cases as well if something's gone on
Right. Of
outside of
course.
football. But yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask. So you mentioned obviously confidentiality is probably, and privacy is a huge thing for these athletes. Some of them who may not necessarily want to have the whole team know that they're seeking help from a mental health professional. So you guys have like offices located on the campus or separate? How does it specifically work if an athlete wants to come see you privately?
Yes, and that's a great point, actually, because there are times I have an office at the facility, which is very convenient, but for people who maybe care about being seen or worry about even being seen coming in and out of the office, then they'll just come to my private practice office, and so it can be kept on the DL. And that's kind of one of the biggest priorities, because players can still be concerned that it might impact their relationships with coaches or playing time or things like that. And even though it won't impact playing time necessarily, but it's good to have that reassurance too. And so wherever I am, I always start off by saying, everything is confidential, and unless we talk about it first, or you give me explicit permission or sign a release, everything stays in here, which can be hard because a lot of times, coaches or training staff want to know, and sometimes to a point need to know in terms of like, ready to play, or if they've been out, if they are well. So sometimes I do have to have conversations where I have to give them some feedback, but it's not really the content of what we talk about. It's just kind of how they're doing, which is the same in any therapeutic scenario.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of trying to encourage them as much as they feel comfortable to be open and honest with the coaching staff and the team, to just allow everyone to be on the same page, because ultimately that will benefit the individual if they have the support from their coaching staff and teammates, if that's something they want.
Right. And we always I'm always sure to say too, especially at the beginning of the season and when I'm meeting the rookies, this is a resource for you to use it when and how you want. But I'm not the only person in a supportive role, so don't feel like, if you're uncomfortable talking to a psychologist, then we've got our director of player engagement, who's really tight with the players. And there's all sorts of people develop relationships with the trainers. They see them so often. We have our team chaplain, so a lot of people like to talk to him. And so, it's kind of based on the comfort level of that player. And I've had some Black players say, who at first might have been uncomfortable or not used to it, say, this is weird. White people go to therapy and Black people go to church. So, it's interesting for me to hear where they're starting from, and what they think of it, or what their impressions are, So it's kind of just educating them too on what that environment is meant to be for them.
No doubt. Yeah, and speaking of which, it sounds like there are a lot of different sort of mental health professionals affiliated with the team. Perhaps your office is more or less like the kind of chief, operation of the mental health program, and the sort of the treatment, sort of paradigm. But I do think it's interesting. There's a lot of different people involved that can be a support. Do you guys ever collaborate, meaning you, the player engagement team, perhaps the chaplain team, to kind of like have a more cohesive, all-encompassing program, or Do you guys even have, I guess, a mission oriented around things like that?
Yes. In fact, we meet monthly
Oh,
to kind of do a roster overview, and our group is the director of player engagement, um, me, the head trainer, and the strength and conditioning coach, and
okay, great.
we come together every month and literally go through the roster and just red light, yellow light, green light people, and so that we know, even if they're not necessarily going to be sent for regular support, just to know who we should be checking up on and looking out for, and just seeing if there are any changes or anything we need to kind of address more closely.
That's great. So there's
That's great. No, yeah, that's great.
some team cohesion. I want to know, so it sounds like primarily you're there to provide individual supports for players, but also you mentioned before, is there an educational aspect to your job where you're giving like maybe small lectures or didactics to coaching staff, training staff, players even, about just general mental health concerns or issues?
Yes, and that we have both at the staff level and the player level. I will do a few staff trainings throughout the year, anything from recognizing signs of emotional or mental distress and next steps, even to self-care. The year we went to the Super Bowl, by January, everybody was just fried and
Mhm.
exhausted and, not getting much sleep and trying to do all these jobs and planning. And so that one, I just said, let's make this one about you, and kind of just walk them through even some stress management techniques and relaxation strategies. And I made them do one during that training, because I said, I
Nice.
know you're
Oh
not
yeah.
going to do this on your own,
Yep.
because that's just kind of who they are, but it also comes with the job too. I mean, you get to that point and it's like you don't have a free second. But I also give rookie trainings every year. We're required by the league to give a certain number of rookie trainings that educate the players on total wellness and various aspects, from mental health to where to find resources. Even within the Players Association has their own website with resources, and then from relationships to dealing with stress, and so there's a series of rookie trainings that I'll give. And then this year we actually I guess kind of because everything has been virtual lately, as you know, and so we started something called Mental Health Mondays, where
Yeah.
each Monday I did a 3 or 4 minute video where I would just educate on anything from dealing with anxiety to sleep, and the importance of sleep and how it impacts performance. Um, I did one after the Minneapolis incident, and just kind of a silent one where I just showed some quotes of some significant quotes from African American leaders around the world. And so there's all different ways, but that was kind of the first time we tried that, and it sounds like it was received well, and it was just posted along with their workouts, because they're all getting their workouts sent to them and doing them at home. So that was kind of to start off their week, and we did that for, I guess, about 2 months or so, 8 weeks.
So it definitely sounds like the Rams are
That's
taking a huge
awesome.
step forward with regards to implementing mental health care, or just overall wellness care, or mental health care into a wellness program that also involves like physical workouts and different things. So it sounds like it's an all-encompassing program. How long has this program been in place within the Rams organization? Is it something that's fairly new, or has it been going on for a while?
It's been there, but it was really formalized last year. The with the revamping of the CBA, the role itself became mandated. So not every team, most of them, I think there were 3 teams that didn't have a team psychologist or some sort of mental health professional. And so that became mandated. Every team had to have one. And along with that, certain qualifications they also had to put in a certain number of hours per week, face-to-face hours, like on site,
Mm-hmm.
and then fulfill certain roles. And we also have like monthly clinician meetings where all of the um, mental health professionals from each team connect and talk about how
Oh
it's
wow.
going and learn from
Nice.
each other, and that can be really helpful in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
seeing where
Yeah, I
each team.
guess that's so cool. No, I didn't realize that this program was so new. And it leads me to ask. I mean, with it being, what is that, even a year in existence? Has Would you say that the coaching staff and the leadership in the various organizations have had an opportunity to really see the difference in terms of what a strong mental health program can provide for the organization, or would you say there's been still some, maybe, adjustment challenges?
For us, on the Rams, there really wasn't a drastic change because I really feel like our club is kind of ahead of the game in terms of having stuff in place and these key people believing in it and supporting it. And so, in fact, we had a site visit before all that was formally institutionalized, and they kind of used our program as a protocol
Oh wow.
for the rest of the league and a lot of the things that we had
Wow.
in place.
That's
So
cool.
we're really proud of that,
Awesome.
and
Yeah.
as it's developed,
That's
um,
great.
we, we didn't have to change too much drastically, and so yeah, it's
Yeah.
good, and it was easy for me having been there already to
Mm-hmm.
kind of just adapt to the changes that we did need to do.
Yeah. So you mentioned before, I'm curious, you mentioned you work with other teams. Have you at all kind of collaborated with other teams in the LA area? Like Armin and I, we have familiarity. We did our training at UCLA, so kind of familiar with how UCLA is affiliated with the Lakers and they provide their mental health care. Dr. Brenda Birch is the player-facing
Mhm.
individual in that unit. So I wonder if you guys ever kind of bounce ideas off these other teams in the Los Angeles area.
You know, not really when it comes to the sports psych stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but when it comes to like this whole thing with how different teams and different sports are handling the COVID stuff, and even the social justice piece, we have checked in with other leagues and other sport professionals and kind of collaborated in that way. In fact, we've had a couple of just Zooms where they were just for the purpose of like town hall format, where we were
Mm-hmm.
just discussing what's going on and what we can do about it. And we did one that kind of collaborated with some NBA um, mental health people, and then I know we checked in with Major League Baseball in terms of with COVID what they were kind of doing and their ideas of return to play. So when it comes down to some of that stuff, we will, and then within the league, sometimes we will bounce ideas off each other. We'll draw from each other in terms of what's working within the sports psychology arena. But then it ultimately comes down to that club's leadership, because we are still kind of separate identities in that sense. So, if there's a team that has, say, a coach that's not fully on board, it can be very hard to promote that as a useful service. And same, I've heard of instances where the mental health professional isn't kind of lining up with the team physician. And,
Mm-hmm.
that can be tough. But I feel so lucky because our group it really does feel like a family,
Yeah.
and everybody is close and everybody just gets along and supports each other. So it makes it easy.
That's great. It sounds like everyone's on the
Sounds
same
like you guys
page.
are. Yeah. It
Yeah.
You can
it
go ahead,
does.
Armin.
Yeah, no, Dr. Hastings, it sounds like you guys are way ahead. And, honestly, Tori and I being out here in Los Angeles ourselves, it's just really great to see that, we have organizations nearby that are really ahead of the game and so forward thinking and progressive when it comes to mental health. Um, and how important it can be. You know, I was looking at your background. I recognize how extraordinary it is, how very impressive your experiences have been. And I was wondering, you know, to what extent your past experiences, either in training or other clinical experience you've had, to what extent something kind of build and create this very progressive program for the Rams?
You know, I didn't have a sports psychologist when I was an athlete, and I really could have used one. So a lot of times I kind of reflect
Yeah,
on when and how it could have served me as a resource, and that helps me look out for things, and just even signs and symptoms, or as I'm getting to know a personality, what to kind of, you know, I can kind of notice if there's a red flag. Um, but I can also speak
yeah,
from an athlete's perspective, and I think that's something that goes a long way
for sure.
in terms of understanding um, what sports and winning can mean to a person, and especially when that's all you've known. And you know, I think a lot of people don't realize, um, especially at this level, a lot of people assume that, yo, you're in the NFL, you know, you're rich, you got it made, you know,
Yeah,
easy from here, and life is golden. But a lot of these guys have families that they need to support, and that they're trying to, not everybody gets a ton of money for this, and it really is year to year, and then if you get injured, it can change everything, it can end everything.
Yeah.
And I experienced actually a season-ending injury my junior year of college, and which was devastating. It was right before the conference meet, and you know, I had to kind of, it was towards the end of the year, but I had to kind of rehab all summer, and so having experienced that really helps me empathize with players dealing with injury, and that urgency to get back, and how you almost want to, you're so tempted to lie or fake good, maybe even before you're physically ready. And you know, there's even, I think, some research that shows, if an athlete, especially an elite athlete, is told, let's say they should be pretty much recovered, let's say 2 to 4 weeks, they hear 1.5 weeks. And that's what because they
yeah,
are used to being the best, well, they're going to be the best at healing.
The competition.
Yeah, it's everything's a competition,
Hmm.
and that can put a lot of pressure on them. And I remember, after, when I had that injury, I remember actually, I tore all the ligaments in my ankle, and I was going into our practice facility, into the indoor track, to meet up with my team and the coach. And I left my crutches outside of the door and went in and really tried to downplay it, to see if he thought it was minimal enough, if he'd let me go. And I mean, I think back to that, it was crazy. I couldn't even walk. I was on crutches, but I mean, you get in that mindset
Yep.
to where you will
yeah.
do almost anything, and self-care goes out the window. So, but that really helps me relate to that mindset at this level.
That's
That's great.
yeah. That's kind of, that's invaluable that you have the ability to like, you were an athlete, so you understand all these different things. Did you know when you were an athlete at Notre Dame that you wanted to go into mental health as a field in the future?
No, I didn't. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I kind of knew what I didn't want to do. And I lived in New York City for a while. And then it kind of, like a light bulb went off. I was actually there for 9/11. And after that, I really, I had been teaching and working in a school, and so many people were impacted by that. I mean, everybody was in one way or another, but there were kids at the school where I was working who had lost a parent, or who it really hit close to home, and I didn't really know how to support them in as big a way as I wanted to, and in a way that they needed, and it's a group of people, so it's hard to get that one-on-one time. And that's when I realized, you know, that fits me. That would be a good fit. And I was ready. I was ready to go back to school. And so that's what I did. And then, and I moved to California. I went to Pepperdine for graduate school and got my master's and my doctorate. And as soon as I always knew I wanted to work with athletes. I hadn't really connected mental health and athletes, but then when I did start studying psychology, I was always somehow working with an athletic population, whether I was, just collaborating on research or presenting, but kind of trying to keep my hand in that. And then as I got further along, I was able to kind of do more on my own. And then I started specializing, and then eventually went back to school again for my specialized certificate in sports psychology. So it kind of just evolved in a way that was perfect. And I am so happy doing what I do. I love my job. I love that, each day brings something new, and it's really personally fulfilling. It really is.
Nice. I enjoy hearing that story from all the way dating back to college, and kind of how you went through these different transitions. I imagine you had to be like so solely focused on track and field and your sport to be able to go to run track and field at Notre Dame, one of the probably top 5-10 biggest athletic programs in the country. And then obviously that ends after you graduate Notre Dame, and then kind of trying to figure out what you're going to do after that. But it sounds like you were able to take that work ethic from being able to run track at Notre Dame and take it into the mental health field. And then you combined your passion for mental health with sports. And now it sounds like you're kind of in the perfect spot.
Yeah. And I did take so much from sports. And I mean, the work ethic, the resilience, I think, that comes from sport participation, and learning how to bounce back and go through challenges and endure things in your personal life going on, and still have to show up and perform and still be part of a team, and all those things, and owning what you are or not contributing, thinking of being innovative in terms of new ways that you can contribute or be a leader. That so many elements just are still with me and a part of who I am.
I have to ask, what was it like living in South Bend, Indiana? I'm originally from Indiana. I grew up in West Lafayette,
really?
right on Purdue's campus, but I went to Indiana University for undergrad. So you weren't originally from Indiana, and you went there just to play sports?
Right. I grew up in Pennsylvania. Okay. Let me just say, by the way, the Purdue track was where I got that injury.
Oh, wow.
I was doing the mile relay, and I stepped off on that metal lip.
Yeah, we don't like Purdue, so that's okay. Okay. Yeah, that's more fuel for the fire against Purdue.
Yeah, but I love Indiana, to be honest. I'm a huge fan of the Midwest, and I grew up somewhere with the four seasons and cold weather. So that it's very cold there on another level.
Yeah.
But I loved Notre Dame so much. It was secondary for me. I loved every second of it. And those 4 years went by very quickly, but they were the best years of my life. They really were.
Nice. Yeah. It's a beautiful campus.
It is. Yeah. I actually grew up on the East Coast, in Maryland, so not too far from Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah.
I'm all about, I remember the very temperate climate. Yeah, the humidity, super humidity in the summer, and then, pretty bitter cold in the winter. So,
yeah.
I guess one question real quick before we let you go. Wanted to know, what's the most common, concern that you see in your practice there with the Rams, at least as far as the one-on-one talk therapy consultation? What would you say the most common reason for an athlete to come to you would be?
I would have to say anxiety. And that can come from the sport itself. That can come from stuff going on outside of the sport, especially in the newer guys who, have that pressure of, if they're unsigned and what's going to happen, and they're competing for their position. So I would say that's probably number one. And then, people have family stuff that maybe is interfering with their focus. But and then, some people just performance issues, or how to I'll teach them how to use imagery or, self-talk to enhance
Yeah.
their performance. But the two areas, the psychological area and then the mental skills and performance side, always intertwine. And even if somebody comes in for, they want to work on some sports psych strategies, it inevitably somehow ties into their personality. And that's a good thing, because then we can really kind of tap into, well, what part of you can make this element of sports psych thrive? How can you thrive as a whole athlete, a whole person?
I really think a great aspect of what you do is the fact that the players have the options to either see you, it sounds like, at the facility, or go to the private practice and have a little extra layer of privacy and confidentiality. So I think it's great that you guys have that option. I wanted to ask, with regards to if you felt a player, an individual needed medication, if you have a psychiatrist that you guys work with, or who all specifically is on your team with regards to the mental health professionals?
Well, regarding mental health, it's just me.
Mm-hmm.
Our team physician, if it's something that I know or that I suggest or think they should be prescribed, then it can go through him. But even he says, there are some things that I just don't know. He's not a psychiatrist, so he's like, some things I have a lot of experience with, some things I don't. And so we do have some outside psychiatrists that we will consult with or work with. But, we also, there's a whole kind of protocol we have to go through in terms of what they're putting in their bodies. So everything has to get approved, and we have to make sure that, everything's cool when they get drug tested and all that. But there's, and sometimes if somebody's like wondering if they have, ADHD or something, I can give, because I'm also in my practice do neuropsychological and psychological testing. So I can do those things too. They don't have to use somebody outside for something.
That's great. That's valuable.
Yeah. So depending on what it is, sometimes we can keep that in-house.
All right.
Awesome. Good stuff.
Well, I guess, yeah, so we can get you out of here. This program you have with the LA Rams is great, but that's just kind of your part-time job. You have your own private practice. And if you want to let our listeners know where they can find more information about you, I don't know if you want to give them your website or what have you, but feel free.
Okay, sure. Yeah, my website is www.drcarriehastings.com, and doctor is DR. And my work number is 310-405-2874. Typically, during the season I'm pretty busy, and then during the off season, obviously it's a lot lighter. So I kind of try to schedule accordingly. But yeah, it's kind of nice to get to work with all different populations when I'm not focused on the football season.
And I went to your website. I know you have a whole lot of resources up there with regards to pretty much everything mental health. So go check it out, and you'll learn something for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really great meeting you, and we're so happy you joined us today. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks so much. It's a pleasure, and this is really a passion of mine. So anytime I have a platform to kind of advocate myself for it, I'm happy to take it. So thank you so much for having me.
And if I could just add, as a recent graduate from school, it's really, really inspirational to see someone like do something that they love and being able to work in psychology. And Dr. Ho, Dr. Trujillo, and you, Dr. Hastings, is really inspirational. And just like shows me that I can do what I want to do, which is work in this sports psychology field. So thank you so much again for your time and coming on the show. You're
welcome. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of room. I really feel, and you guys can probably agree, it's still a fairly new field. I mean, it's really still developing, and there's so much work to be done. So there's a lot of opportunity for anybody who's interested in it.
Yeah, I recently went to the Pac-12 Mental Health Summit here at UCLA, and they had...
Oh, I was there.
Really? Oh, awesome. Yeah, so the NCAA's put in their new program. The NFL has their new program. Sounds like the Rams are kind of leading the way right now. So you're on the forefront for sure, and let's continue this conversation. This is fun.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. And thank you guys for what you do and for, getting this conversation out there too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate
Much
it.
needed.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right.
All right. Well, thank you.
All
Thank you
right,
so
bye.
much.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Have a good one.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Stay safe.
You too.